In today's video, we will be exploring the novel Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, particularly with the use of tragic heroes to drive the plot and, more importantly, to show every character in a different light. For many, the novel is a classic tale of the human struggle to get the most out of life, be that the need to be rich, have a family, live simplistically, retain a great education, or something darker, like ruin a young boy's chance at love. The book is composed of characters, each with their own agenda and their own morals. And as we dig deeper into the novel, the tragic heroes come out of the woodwork, and their stories get told. So first, we need to answer a question proposed by Charles Dickens. Are tragic heroes inherently bad or only lost? Aristotle describes a tragic hero as a person who must invoke a sense of pity and fear in the audience. He is considered a man of misfortune that comes to him through error of judgment. There are 6 key traits for Aristotle's complete definition of a tragic hero. First, the character must have a tragic flaw to lead to his doom. Then they need pride and disrespect for the natural order to allow the tragic hero to play God, if you will. The reversal of fate is also very important. It is when the character either changes sides from good to evil or makes a life-changing choice. Following the reversal of fate is the important discovery in which everything comes crashing down with either death or tragedy. Then there is a punishment that will come not long after. Most importantly, to distinguish a villain from a tragic hero, there must be a feeling of pity held in the eyes of the audience. Now that we have a definition of a tragic hero, we will discuss some tragic heroes that we're more familiar with. Previously in class, we focused on Shakespeare's play Macbeth. The main character was a tragic hero. Macbeth was so consumed with hunger for the throne that he didn't care who he hurt in the process, even women and children. Still, the audience has a connection with Macbeth that allows him to see that Macbeth should be pitied. No man should know his own future and take it upon himself to see that it is done. It would drive anyone mad to know that they will one day have success but find it out of their reach in the present. It was the discovery of his future that pushed him over the edge and led to Macbeth's demise. He changed his morals and his personality in the process. The real tragedy of Macbeth. In today's pop culture, there are many more tragic heroes. In the classic American saga Star Wars, there was Anakin Skywalker. He sold his soul to save his wife and then let the darkness consume him. The discovery of the future led him to seek guidance from the darkest of places. It was not his love that was his destruction, but his inability to see how the natural order of things are. If you haven't seen the end of the Star Wars saga, you can guess what happened to Anakin. He became Darth Vader, the lead villain that his son fights. At the end of the final movie, though, Darth Vader ends up teaming with his son to do what is right. The true nature of Anakin is revealed, and the audience no longer sees him as a villain, but a tragic hero that was merely a pawn. The real world is filled with tragic heroes as well, one of them being Whitney Houston. She had a traumatic life that led her searching in the wrong places. She was on top of the world with her hit, I Will Always Love You. She had adoring fans and a family that cared about her. Then she started taking drugs that led to her death. Whitney Houston had a weakness in her just like Macbeth and Anakin. Macbeth had a weakness for power and Anakin had a weakness for love, but Whitney had a weakness of heart. Her husband said that she died of a broken heart. Those around her say that it was because her life wasn't all she wanted it to be. Sometimes we tend to think that literary terms don't apply to daily life, but sadly in this case, characters are made from the people around us. So who would want to create a tragic hero? Charles Dickens was the man behind this particular case of tragic heroes. He himself was born in England where the setting takes place. The story is closer to home than some of his other works because the audience can see his father in the pages. At a young age, Charles' father was taken from him because of his looming debt. He got sent to jail and Charles went to work. This changed the way that Charles saw criminals. He gained empathy for them because he felt like they had a good heart deep down despite their past errors. This directly affects the characters in the book. Magwitch was a criminal who hurt people, but at the end of the book, he becomes a good man who only wants a good life and to give back. Dickens took what the audience thought was a villain and let us see his mistakes with his better qualities. Magwitch is just one of the tragic heroes portrayed in the book. To get a picture of the whole story, though, we need to turn back to the main character. Pip is an orphan who got a spout of good luck once he made it to the doorstep of Miss Havisham, a wealthy woman who could bring him out of the lower class and give him an amazing life. But there's a price. Pip must move away from Joe, the man who raised him, in order to become a proper businessman, and must subject himself to the torments of a girl named Estella to gain favor with Miss Havisham. He falls in love with Estella because of her beauty and into a trap set by Miss Havisham. Pip thinks that he has everything figured out, that he is going to become successful, marry Estella, and live a great life. Later in the novel, though, Pip learns that his road to success was not bought with Miss Havisham's money, but with the money from a criminal who he once knew. His dreams of marrying Estella go down the drain once the discovery is made. Instead, Pip is left feeling used and cheated. He never gets his hero story because of his search for another life. Pip could have had a life of simplicity and joy, but he went out of the natural order of things because he wanted the life that Miss Havisham was baiting him with. Magwitch is a criminal that Pip helps due to murderous threats and a young boy's fears in the first scene of the book. He is a scary-looking man that is bent on running away from the police. After the first scene, though, readers do not expect to see him again. He comes back a changed man, rich, kind, giving. He helps Pip live the life that he always wanted. But when he shows his face, Pip feels awful, like it's dirty money. It takes the death of Magwitch to really make Pip see that he has changed and was worth loving. Magwitch embodies the idea that people are inherently good. His past has made him an awful person, but one that can be recovered. When I think of Magwitch, I think that the time spent with Pip is the same as when Darth Vader rescues his son. For the last good moment in their lives, they do good. Much more of Magwitch's life that the reader sees is used for good than bad, making the audience feel for him later in the book. Then, of course, his past deeds catch up with him, and he has to face the music. Estella is an orphan like Pip, but instead of getting loving parental figures like Pip's sister and her husband Joe, Estella is stuck with Miss Havisham. In her youth, she lives in a wealthy home with the company of a shell of a woman, bitter from love lost. As Estella grows up, her beauty makes up for her lack of empathy for others or loving nature. She catches the eye of many, but no one ever catches hers. She is instead forced into a life of isolation brought on by Miss Havisham's lack of love and the start of Estella's life. Miss Havisham never taught her to love, making an almost robotic daughter. Estella is doomed to a life of unhappiness, just like so many other tragic heroes. Mrs. Havisham was left at the altar and has been crazy ever since. She has not taken off her wedding dress or put up any of the food from the wedding. She even stopped the clock to when the service was going to take place. Mrs. Havisham has never gotten over her heartache, a heartache that later turned to hate. After the wedding, she made it her goal to wreak as much havoc on the male species as it had done to her. Enter Pip and Estella. Miss Havisham created an evil scheme to take back girl power. She wanted Pip to fall in love with Estella and then get his heart broken by her. In doing so, she made Estella incapable of love, and Pip a man trying to reach for the sun and getting burnt up in the process. The two could never be happy because of her. Once all was known, Miss Havisham realized her mistake and wanted to fix things, but she couldn't. She died with a heavy conscience, knowing that she had caused pain just like the man she had grown to hate that left her at the altar. The tragic heroes in Charles Dickens' story are different in many ways. Pip is good for all his life, but has a tragic life because of others. Estella never has the chance to even have a good life. She only knows hate and indifference. Magwitch gets the opportunity to right his wrongs, and he takes it, knowing that he is putting himself in danger of being caught by the police and dying. Miss Havisham never gets a happy memory of doing good in her life after the marriage ceremony gone wrong. All of these characters have a different beginning and middle, but come to the same conclusion. Because of their flaws, they are doomed and put on the list of tragic heroes, along with so many others. Now we see tragic heroes have many different faces and circumstances. With this knowledge, we can look at essay prompts dealing with tragic heroes and be prepared. Let's look at a prompt and pick it apart to create an essay outline. According to critic Northrop Frye, tragic heroes are so much the highest points in their human landscape that they seem the inevitable conductors of the power about them, great trees more likely to be struck by lightning than a clump of grass. Conductors may of course be instruments as well as victims of the divisive lightning. Select a novel or play in which a tragic figure functions as an instrument of the suffering of others. Then write an essay in which you explain how the suffering brought upon others by that figure contributes to the tragic vision of the work as a whole. First, we need to separate this into two chunks. The first chunk tells you the definition of a tragic hero to base one's essay on, in case you're hitting a roadblock and don't know what to do. I underline the keywords that we need to look for when thinking about a tragic hero. In Great Expectations, we have 4 tragic heroes to choose from. We need to pick the best one to do the job. The character that we pick should have enough power so they're important enough to the story to make a difference. The tragic hero also needs to be an instrument as well as a victim. All of the characters display these qualities. Pip has power because of his knowledge, but sometimes he pushes away those he loves because of his love for Estella. Estella herself has power in her beauty. She didn't get love early on as a child, so she was a victim. Later on, though, because of this, she hurts those around her that look for her love. Joe has power in his status as a criminal. People think that he is dangerous. He's been an instrument of suffering, but also a victim when it comes to his prison sentence. It's hard to choose between all of the characters, and there is no wrong way to answer the prompt. The easiest way, however, might be to analyze Miss Havisham, because she's caused the most damage as a tragic hero and has a deeper story. In terms of the book, I think that she contributes the most to the story because it was her plan in the first place that caused everything else to happen. With that in mind, let's dig deeper into Miss Havisham and see what we can analyze. First, we have to understand why she's a tragic hero in the fullest extent. She has a tragic flaw of not being able to love after her fiancé walks out on her, and wants others to feel just like her. She's unable to be happy for anyone else and only wallows in her misery. She has disrespect for the natural order of things when she decides to experiment on her adopted daughter and Pip. She wants to change their lives. For Estella, she might not have all bad intentions because she might have wanted her to be able to protect herself from heartache. Still, she used her position as a guardian to shape Estella's heart because she thinks that she knows best when she really doesn't. Miss Havisham always had ill intentions for Pip because he was a boy and therefore the enemy. With her power of status, she took Pip out of his life and made him see a world that he could never have. Her reversal of fate comes after her fiancé leaves her. She's cast out of her happy life into one filled with despair. Her important discovery comes after her mistake. Miss Havisham sees the pain that she caused Estella and Pip and says that she's sorry after being confronted. She realizes that she's become the instrument and is no longer the victim. Her punishment comes in the long-lasting guilt that she has ruined 2 lives. But after hearing more about her story, the audience is still able to find pity for her. We see the big picture once Magwitch explains the part of the story that no one else will, how she got conned. A criminal used her to get her money, and when he did, he left her. So it makes sense that she has a problem with trusting or loving anyone. Like we said before, Miss Havisham's power gives her the ability to hurt others and magnify her flaws. First, she has power from money, what got her into trouble in the first place. Still, she uses her money to make Pip think that he is more to her than he is. When he left her house after working for her for a while, she gave him a very large sum. Miss Havisham is not afraid to use her money to entice people. Miss Havisham did have money, but she wasn't allowed to own property. In England, the Law of Property Act was created in 1922, making Miss Havisham still controlled by men in many ways if they saw fit. Her male relatives would oversee her things. They must have allowed her free reign over her home and pocketbook. Like many other women of the time, though, who weren't as lucky to get all the money at their disposal, Miss Havisham did have her status. In those times, status was very important. When Pip's sister heard that Miss Havisham wanted to see Pip, she was really excited and made a big deal of the whole thing. It is her status that let her control Pip's life and keep him working to be better, even though he never would be good enough. Finally, she uses her guardianship over Estella to do what she wants her to. She raised her to be cold and mean, and so she was, but Estella was also obedient. Miss Havisham made her play cards with a boy she didn't like and tease him. Estella could have refused, but Miss Havisham had authority over her and she knew it. Normally we see parental authority as a good thing, but Miss Havisham didn't use it as such. Miss Havisham is essentially two sides of the same coin, victim and instrument because of her actions. Now let's dive into the main part of the prompt. It says, select a novel or play in which a tragic figure functions as an instrument of the suffering of others. Then write an essay in which you explain how the suffering brought upon others by that figure contributes to the tragic vision of the work as a whole. It's easiest to underline the two things that we're supposed to write about in the essay. We have to explain how the suffering caused by Miss Havisham affected the characters around her and how it contributes to the whole book. After we're done with our outline, it's a smart idea to go back to what we have underlined in order to make sure that we're on the same page as the creator of the prompt. We need to describe the events that took place in the book, and we need to understand the bigger picture of the work. Now let's get to brainstorming. If you feel comfortable with writing an outline to go with Great Expectations, pause the video and give it a try. If not, I recommend that you use Macbeth or another story to create your own outline. Alright, I hope that you've all written some sort of short outline to prepare for the test. Let's go over mine. To start with, I wanted to remind myself how Miss Havisham hurt those around her. She did 3 key things: broke 2 characters' hearts, made up a scheme for vengeance, and used her power to complete her plan in every way that she could. Miss Havisham's character contributed greatly to the book. She made the book seem more realistic and less like a fairy tale. In the beginning of the book, I thought that the story would be about a young boy rising up, but as we see in the real world, that is oftentimes hard to do. By having a character like Miss Havisham in the book, the darkness of the real world is there. Miss Havisham can also be used as a tale of a tragic hero. Destroying 2 lives didn't make her feel better. If we think back to the way that Charles Dickens wanted to show that people were inherently good despite their circumstances, we can see that here as well. When everything was over, Miss Havisham didn't want to be a villain. Miss Havisham is just the character that Dickens was looking to create. Like Magwitch, she is not a bad person on the inside. If she was, she wouldn't think anything of hurting people. For the plot, Miss Havisham is also very important. She orchestrates everything from Pip falling in love with Estella to Estella being unable to love. Without Miss Havisham, the book wouldn't be possible. Pip would be able to move on with his life, and the story would not be bitter at the end. Miss Havisham creates that ending whether she likes it or not. Now that we have a ton of information on Miss Havisham, let's start. As we have talked about in class before, it is smart to list the author, title of book, short summary in 1 or 2 sentences, and then the thesis. My thesis is: Miss Havisham was a tragic hero in Great Expectations who used her power to destroy 2 people's lives, thus driving the plot of the entire book. I personally like to start an essay with a broad scope on humanity to pique interest. For example, we live in a society filled with tragic heroes. Then we can focus in on the book and get to the purpose of this essay. So how did I get to the thesis? When I thought of how Miss Havisham is an instrument instead of a victim, I wanted to focus on how she was able to be an instrument, which stems from her power. Without it, she wouldn't be a tragic hero and she couldn't do her job as a character. I would like you to notice how the prompt that we see doesn't ask us to talk about Miss Havisham's time as a victim, only as an instrument. We can't afford to get off topic. To me, I see the definition portion as a way to trip you up if you don't read the prompt carefully enough. Therefore, we only need to explain how she used her power to hurt others and how that made the book what it is. In the first body paragraph, I have put power and status together because for the most part they go hand in hand. If you think that you will have enough time to write 4 body paragraphs, be my guest, but for me 3 is plenty. In this paragraph, we will talk about how she used Pip and lured him into her house. Then we can talk about the effects that she had on Pip as a result of her plan. In the next body paragraph, I would like to talk about how she used her guardianship over Estella in order to do her bidding. Then we can focus on how Estella became who she was as a result of Miss Haversham's bad parenting skills and use of that power. We have talked about how Miss Haversham has hurt two of the main characters, but now it is time to show how that has affected the story as a whole. We can do this in the couple of ways we discussed before. We have three options. Option 1. In Pip's case, she made his life a reality and not a fairy tale. Charles Dickens wanted his audience to understand that life is not a fairy tale. Option 2. We can show that after she has been used as an instrument, she is no longer bad, only remorseful, proving that people are inherently good. And option 3. Miss Havisham drives the entire plot of the story. The first two options may seem like they derail from the prompt a little, but they are how she contributes to the book and drives the plot. It will be harder to tie together than option 3, but the first two options give her a little more depth and give us more to write about. Now for the conclusion. In the conclusion, you will need to tie everything together, the thesis statement and body paragraphs. If you pick option 1 or 2 for the last body paragraph, make sure that it is added to the conclusion. Our work here is done. Oh, you're still there? I didn't expect you to be here after the essay portion. Oh, okay. You're ready to march on and find out how tragic heroes play a bigger role in your life than you might think? All tragic heroes are some form of expression, like how Miss Havisham wore her ruined wedding dress, or how Estella presented herself to the reader. Some tragic heroes are more easy to spot than others. I would like to play a game, tragic hero versus hero. You decide whether the person is a tragic hero or hero. Vincent van Gogh, hero or tragic hero? Vincent van Gogh is a tragic hero. What about Superman? Are you 2 for 2? Finally, we have Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. Here's where it gets tricky. In the original movie, she was a straight-up villain, but Disney is known to change the story around a couple of times. In the recent movie, she is actually the tragic hero. In all honesty, this raises a bigger question. Does every villain think of themselves as a tragic hero, and who decides who is a tragic hero? It is subjective to the audience based on how they feel about the character. Looking at the big picture, we are all tragic heroes because life isn't perfect and we get hurt, so every villain is in turn a tragic hero, and every hero could possibly be a villain, and... Take a deep breath. Remember, all tragic heroes have a fatal flaw in the sympathy of the audience because, in the end, they come to their doom. Tragic heroes are not anti-heroes. People who lack heroes' qualities but do the right thing for the wrong reasons. Tragic heroes are also not Byronic heroes, selfish people who are flawed and do things that are socially unacceptable. Some examples of anti-heroes include Michael Scott from the popular television show The Office. He does not have the qualities that make up a good hero, being a leader, being brave, being super smart. Sometimes he does the right thing to impress other people. For example, Michael Scott is notorious for his hatred of Toby, the head of the branch's human resource department. When Toby decides to quit his job there, Michael is really mean to him and decides to give him a rock as a going-away present. Little does he know that he will have an audience when Toby opens the present. Michael decides to give him his watch instead because he gets pressured into it by Pam. Michael Scarn has strikingly similar qualities, except he's a secret agent that works to protect the president and all of mankind. Jack Sparrow is our final example of an anti-hero. He's from the movie series Pirates of the Caribbean. He's a pretty smart pirate, but also a little crazy. Too crazy to be a regular hero. He is known to be a double-crosser and does the right thing for the wrong reasons. Byronic heroes are a select few of the anti-heroes. Severus Snape is one of the Byronic heroes found both in literature and in the silver screen. He is from J.K. Rowling's most well-known books, the Harry Potter series. Snape does socially unacceptable things like bullying a student. Hint, hint, Harry Potter. This is due to his selfish nature. He wanted to be with Lily Potter, Harry Potter's mother, but the feeling wasn't mutual, and so he took it out on Harry. Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice is also a social pariah, but he wants Elizabeth. He's a harsh character that oftentimes lacks communication skills. Byronic heroes and anti-heroes often do not have sympathy from the audience. Either they are so flawed that the character cannot relate to them and they are seen as comedy relief, or they're seen as villains for so long that the audience would never be on their side. The good qualities have to outweigh the bad qualities in order for a hero to be a hero. I think about heroes and tragic heroes and anti-heroes being on a line in between good and bad. Heroes are the ultimate good because they're selfless. Tragic heroes have flaws, making them less than good and therefore doomed. Anti-heroes and Byronic heroes are selfish characters and mainly stick to doing things for themselves, making them more evil than tragic heroes who aren't always selfish. Tragic heroes are a part of our entertainment because they exhibit real life in moments when nothing is looking up. They are so real to us because most people are tragic heroes. We all have flaws and quirks that make us who we are. These flaws don't isolate us from people, but make us more alike than ever. At one point, everyone wants to reach for the moon and falls short. Those around us help us right back up after a tragedy. The most intense pieces of work end with tragedy of some magnitude because it's what we experience. Our goal is to not be like Miss Havisham, but more like Pip and Estella, who faced the tragedy and learned not to dwell on it, but to find happiness in other corners of their lives. Everyone is a tragic hero at some point in their lives. Pip, Estella, Magwitch, Miss Havisham, and yes, we are also tragic heroes. Charles Dickens used our world to make some of the most realistic characters I've seen in a while. Through this process, I was able to rediscover just how realistic classic books are. When I think of classics, I normally separate them from realistic fiction, but most of the time, that is what they are for people of a certain time period. With their realistic nature, they often contain tragic heroes. It is what makes them classics in the first place. They're so relatable. I leave you with an optional writing prompt. Write a short story with your own tragic hero. They will need a tragic flaw to change the natural order of things, a reversal of fate, an important discovery, punishment, and they should be pitied and feared. Aristotle's definition of a tragic hero is pretty strict, but many writers use a more loose interpretation, focusing on tragedy and an audience's empathy. Just remember to have fun. The story can be from any genre of your choosing, from realistic fiction to sci-fi to mystery to a combination of all of the above. Just have fun.